Ptere Murgor. He's the manager for disaster risk and reduction. Welcome. I know you just literally come from Mahio. How is it over there?
It's still not very good because we are at the stage where people are still in a holding camp, still trying to finish search and rescue. Those who had lost their loved one coming to collect the bodies, those are very emotive moments. So it's still not a very good situation out there, because the next thing also is how now do we handle those people who are in camps? Yeah.
And there's a lot in camps right now, right? Who've been displaced, who've been...
Yes, there is a lot across the country. Nairobi itself, over close to 30-something camps, and Huruma yesterday evening, even one of the camps, there was a lot of pressure because of the demolitions, about the executive order, 48 hours for people to evacuate.
So are they evacuating?
They're evacuating because we've seen like about 12,000 households that have moved, and what we are anticipating is likely another 15,000 more who are those along those areas that are to be demolished. So that means a lot of people are going to be in this camp, or temporary, what we call temporary settlements. Yeah.
And which is the hardest hit area so far? Because we see pictures from around the country. We've seen Maimai, we've seen Tana River, we've seen other parts. Which is the hardest hit?
Actually, so far, Nairobi is among, interestingly, Nairobi is one of the hardest hit areas. Then we go to parts of West Kenya, and then the Tana River area. Tana River, because it is low-lying, it's a basin. So you realize that since it's downstream, the dams overfilling, and then the downstream pouring from the mountain area because of the heavy rains, those are among the hardest hit areas so far.
When you see River Nyando breaking its banks, that's also
the Ahero. Yeah, in fact, that was just a very short one, but the impact is boom. And that's typical of floods, because we call floods a sudden onset, which means it comes within a very short notice, and the impact then can be felt adversely and even over a long period of time.
What is the Redcross? I mean, you guys have been working day and night and day. Do you have enough staff? Do you have enough personnel? Or are you stretched thin?
Currently, we are getting to that point. It's now all hands on deck. Literally, this is not now when you just say hands on deck, and it's literally all hands on deck. Every manager, every responder, every volunteer in any corner of this country responding. We are managing so far, and I think it's majorly because this is like a moving target. You realize that there's a part that was majorly affected, then it's now moving to some certain areas. So currently we are managing by redeploying people who are in an area which was probably adversely affected or is not yet affected. We could say what we are strained on or stretched thin is on resources to respond. Yeah, because our large base, volunteer base and staff across the 47 counties has enabled us to be able to manage with the situation. But then the bigger question becomes the resources with which to respond. Because normally how we operate is we have a contingency plan. Our contingency planning and even our mandate as auxiliary role to government is to respond to the first 150,000 people, which is 30 households. So we've surpassed that mark. So surpassing that mark means our contingency plan level or threshold has been busted.
Speaking of resources, Kenya Redcross Secretary General Dr. Ahmed Idris says you're going to need about 7 billion shillings.
Yeah, and this is the reason, because if you look at just the people affected by floods or where people are in camps right now, that would be short-sightedness. Short-sightedness, why? Because it's one thing to see people displaced by floods. As it is a sudden onset, it suddenly disappears, but the aftermath, the impact remains for over a long period of time. These people will need reconstruction, and reconstruction is a very resource-intensive affair. What do we mean by reconstruction? Reconstructing structures that these people are going to move back into. They are what we are calling mental health needs. I mean, the psychosocial and the mental distress people are in, the ones who lost their loved ones. Think of Athi River, where people just woke up one morning and their businesses, their means of livelihoods have been swept away. So the distress is even, how do I start earning an income? Probably somebody was on a loan or servicing a loan from the business. That is the kind of duress people are in. So we have of health issues, mental health issues, reconstruction issues, recovery. From the early recovery, we are talking about almost 40,000 acreages that have been destroyed of post-harvest losses. How will these people be helped? So we are looking at food insecurity that is looming. So when you look at that 7B, it looks even into the early recovery process. How do we help people recover from the impacts and the effects of the flood?
Is there like a standard rate or?
There's what we call multipurpose cash assistance. Multipurpose cash assistance is first of all to provide cash for people for a period of maybe sometimes 3 months. It can be 2 months or 3 months depending on availability of resources. And how we calculate this is what we are using, we are calling a minimum expenditure basket. So the minimum expenditure basket has the basic survival needs for you to just go by. And then there's like, you give an estimate. Like if you look at people in Mathare, in those areas of informal settlements, the rent would be about 5,000. So if you give that monthly transfer value, we call it transfer value, you're factored in about an amount of rent and amount of buying basic commodities. When you come to livelihoods, the calculation is a bit different. You're thinking about if it is a farmer, for instance, who you need to support to have early maturing crops. You want to think about around providing seeds, and you can give about 2,000 to 3,000 per farmer. And in a targeted area, and then you can support them also with fertilizer and certain things. So you give a basket of cash that could be about 3,000 to 4,000. There are areas whereby you restock by giving livestock, and there are areas, if the calculation is done well, to restart businesses or startups. Those are now bigger conversations with different contexts, giving the appropriate needs for the different contexts.
So when the president says each and every person will get 10,000 shillings, is that going to be enough for the short term?
So yes, that is what the approach. That one is the multipurpose cash assistant on the basket. So that is a basket to meet the basic needs. And what we are doing is a layered approach in the sense that, for example, Kenya Redcross, we shall have given what we are calling non-food items. The non-food items comprise of the tarpaulins to form temporary tents. We have what we call kitchen sets, and we have blankets and sleeping mats. So basically what we are saying is the temporary shelter needs of these people have been catered for. So the 10,000 now helps them to prioritize their basic needs to go by.
You've mentioned you've got like a climate scientist at Redcross. And one of the focuses is responding to these emergencies. Is there a collaboration, or do you have like an expert in these things that can also help the counties to be able to mitigate or handle some of these emergencies in a professional way?
That's exactly what we do. If I may take Nairobi County, for example, and I was just seeing Bramwell because I've seen him have a lot of efforts. Really, he's one of those people who has really come very close to Redcross, come close to say, can we have MOUs? Can we try, help us to see how to mitigate disasters? You'll remember when El Nino was being predicted, Nairobi County was busy trying to clear drainages.
Yeah.
They were busy trying to, these are the efforts they were putting in place.
Yeah.
So I'm not speaking on behalf of county, but what I'm simply saying is, yes, we collaborate very closely with counties. If I may mention Tana River, for example, working very closely with the Governor Dado, who has been there to say, how can we collaborate to disseminate information to people? What solutions do we need? So now he's working on establishing grounds so that those people who are at riverine areas can be moved there.
Yeah.
So yes, Redcross is seeking to collaborate with counties to support them, to provide expertise, to provide guidance, to leverage, any existing experience to be able to mitigate. Why are they integral? Because you see, this is the decision-making body. Policies, the revenue sits with them, the command to make decisions around, like, for example, when you see Mombasa governor deciding and saying, I am giving an instruction that all the beach businesses be closed for this period of time because of the looming hazard of Cyclone Hidaya. You see, that is because of the collaboration, and they're listening very closely, and they're asking, what actions do we need to take, and we guide them. So those existing modalities, and not just with the county level, even with the national level. We sit at the National Disaster Operations Center as a very close collaborator and auxiliary to government to guide on now even how to make emergency decisions, how to inform the public, how to communicate to them, even having an emergency operations center where people can call toll free, they can seek information, they can call to give information. So we are very hinged at those areas where there is gaps, even where there are fire engines but there are gaps. How do we collaborate to see how to fill these gaps? Because when the rubber meets the road, actually, you just need to save lives.
Now that you mentioned fire engines, in developed countries, it's called a water geyser.
Yeah.
And so, like, if there's a fire, let's say, where? Somewhere in Magadi Road. And the water, I think the nearest fire station is in town, yeah?
No, CBD.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, are we making any progress in making the county and the people in there understand that some of these disaster responses need to be as close as possible, like every 2 kilometers, there's an ambulance, there's a fire engine, there's a this, there's a that. So that when the fire actually happens, let's say it happens at rush hour, before you maneuver through making people understand that there's an emergency, things can be responded to quite quickly. Because I know the slums.
Did we have Sonko Rescue Team?
That was a personal initiative. You can also have the Jeff Koinange rescue
or
team.
Nick rescue team. Yeah, but Nick, to your question, yes. You see, the ideal model would be that. And the paperwork and the framework is there.
No, we are good at paperwork.
Yes,
in fact, on paper, we are as good
yes.
as Singapore.
Yes. So now I think, and let's just agree, we are coming of. That's why I use the word we are coming of age. Having been in this field for quite a while and seeing where we've come from, we are at places where we are having very good conversations. We are not yet there. I'm not saying we are there.
Yes.
But why am I being optimistic? Because there's the disaster risk management bill and the policy. These are enablers. These are enforcers. Because when they're in place, it becomes law, it becomes a point of reference, and it now enables you to enact. Now, governors, if you had keenly, I was on Citizen TV the other day with Governor Dado and one of the Makueni representatives, and they were saying the 2%, you're saying you're given as disaster kit, it's 2%, but that 2% is very little. It's not that it's being misused, it's very little, because we try to establish something, but then the money is used up. So does that mean we need to scale up to procure more fire engines to preposition? Does that mean we need to customize, like even in areas where there is limited access, the way you rightly say, how do we build infrastructure to now achieve that? So the paperwork is there, the spirit of it appears to be there. The question now is, how do we move now to action that, to really make sure that we are prepositioning these items at maybe the basic minimum start can be at the sub-county level. And if they're there, it's a start. It may not be the best, but it's a start. And if it's at sub-county level, how functional is it? The other question now, again, you may find unfortunate is it could be there, but how long does it take to getting it and going? There's a time we had an unfortunate incident where a fire engine reaches the ground and then you realize it does not have enough. It's not even functional, So what does that mean?
Like, how does a fire engine leave the fire station without water? Like, what did they do with that water?
So those are the other questions, that can be discussed.
It was washing cars.
But my point is, we seem to be headed in the right direction. We are not yet there. We just need to keep the momentum and to keep pushing at it.
At the same time, when the opposition calls for, insists that the government declares these floods a national disaster, what are your thoughts?
It would be difficult for us, from what we are seeing, based on just seeing widespread impacts, to say now it's time to declare a national disaster. We know there are several lives that have been impacted. We know there is dire need. So government, as and when they see those thresholds reached, they would always make the decisions they need to make. What we know is this also appears like a moving target because it's not situated in one place. I think that's the delicate balance with this one. This today, 2-3 days, it's in this area. The next 3 days, you're hearing Nyando. The next time you're hearing Maimahiu, so probably that is the dilemma within which, because sometimes one of the key things is if you see a disaster sitting in an area and impacting people in an area over a period of time, that now brings about that issue of threshold. So I think that is where the government probably is analyzing and trying to look at the balance to see, is it really getting to a point where we are not able to cope, or are we able to cope with whatever resources it is? And I think that's what it's trying to do currently, to try and see what resources do we have in places. Are we able to deploy these resources to help the people who are affected or not?
And the weatherman says expect more rains.
Yes, absolutely. They are saying like we might be into June with these rains. I mean, I was looking, and today is when I've seen the sun smile at us this morning, but I don't know how long that'll last.
And then the problem is it might smile with here in Nairobi, and then somewhere else.
Another thing, Homa Bay or wherever, the Busia, the Budalangi, the traditional Budarangi. And, Busia and Budalangi is because Lake Victoria the water levels have risen.
Right.
The Zoya River basin is getting ready to pour. There is seepages from underground. So those are areas we are looking, Budalangi and Tana River.
And moving forward, like you mentioned earlier on, after the floods comes the drought. And there's going to be a lot of issues.
Absolutely. So talking about weatherman Nick, I saw you like the prediction, and Jeff, your question is very pertinent because what we are calling this Enso neutral, we are from El Nino. Yeah. Moving into what we're calling Enso is the opposite of El Nino. And La Nina means limited rains. It does not mean absence of rain, and people need to understand this. Drought does not mean absence of rain. It simply means limited or poor performing rainfall that cannot make the ground produce, Yeah, so that's what we are facing. It is predicted that through the weatherman that into June, July, the rains will start diminishing, and then areas that are prone to drought will start now experiencing the brunt of drought. So we are likely to move from heavy rains and lots of water into now dry rains, and that is going to be dire because think about post-harvest losses during this rain period that has diminished food reserves or the food producing capacity. And then now we go into La Nina, again, crops not being produced. So that means we're going to face hunger then when we get to that point.
Do you think the world is ending? Do you?
Now that is a question that God or wise Nick, clever Nick can tell us.
Oh man.
Do you?
Jeff, Nick here wants to know if the world is ending. I wonder if he has some plans.
No, I just want to make you smile.
Course, of course, yeah.
After Huruma, where next?
Today. So after Huruma is to go back to the Situation Room and to do a briefing and to analyze what's really happening across the country, because according to the predictions, there are areas that now we want to zoom in on. Like, by the way, we really utilize the Kenya Meteorological Weather Forecast, and in fact, they have even up to 7-day forecast. That's why I was saying their precision has become very good. So now we want to start looking at where looks like the problem areas, where is it likely to have mudslides. Then from there now is to work with the teams on the ground, to just talk to them. If we see that the dams are likely to overflow, like Tana River, to start talking to them to prepare them to take early action. Like in Tana River, it's very good. People are self-evacuating in the sense that they are already moving to the camp in good time, so they are averting the risk that is likely to befall them. The coastal region, for instance. So from Huruma, after seeing the situation there and addressing the needs that need to be addressed, by the way, in Uthiru today morning, there's also a meeting to bring down that building because it's a hazard. So a multi-stakeholder team comprising government, the KDF, and of course KDF is part of government, and of course humanitarian agencies like Redcross. We are there now to just make sure that safely people are removing their stuff and the building is being brought down. Also, the different responses going on across the country. Mai Mahiu is still active in operation. Nyando is still active in operation. Homa Bay, in Kisumu, in the North Rift region, areas that have been affected, the Baringos and all that. So it's a beehive of activities. You're seeing our SecGen there. From here, he's being waited for straight to Baringo, because there are issues of conflict and again the floods that are happening there. So it's a beehive of activities just trying to make sure we are supporting communities all around.
You're getting all the help you need from government. For say, you mentioned KDF. What about NYS? Do you see their presence out there?
Yeah, NYS is also on the ground. Around 300 of them are on the ground in Mahiu. There's been a lot of collaboration, a lot of goodwill, a lot of coordination meetings. Just yesterday alone, there was a meeting at the DP's office to try and see what next do we do. And we are aware that on Friday, there's been a lot of close coordination. From here, actually, also one of the other things we need to do is to link with the National Disaster Operations Center at the Nyayo House, that is the government body under Interior that is coordinating emergencies, So a lot of working with government to try and see how do we support appropriate excuse me, how do we support appropriately the flood affected populations? If you look at that picture, actually, that is in Tana River Madogo area. You can see the trees. Those are big trees that are like shrubs. That's how high the water is. So everything else is submerged. You can imagine those are croplands. All those crops have been submerged.
And that's where the boats were capsizing.
Yes,
right?
that's where the boats
Madogo.
were capsizing. Exactly, that's where the boats were capsizing. So look at that kind of impact. And it's not just if you look at the picture into the horizon, thousands and thousands of kilometers. It's like that. Imagine trees, big trees, looking like shrubs, because they've been, submerged into water.
I hear also Sabaki River may have overflowed.
Exactly, because Sabaki River, you see it's downstream. It's one of the tributaries that is receiving and pouring into the ocean. So if it breaks its banks, that shows you the risk of the communities around there. Yeah.
Are you hopeful we're going to get through this?
We're going to get through it, albeit with certain impacts to live by. Definitely, there'll be some serious impacts to work with, after this situation. But what we like is the kind of, you see, everything has a negative and a positive. What we like is the opportunities that have really now come in strongly. The DRM bill has been something we've been working on for several years, from when I was very young in disaster management to this date, and I'm running with it now. But there's very good momentum now for that. There are very good conversations around prepositioning funds for early action. There is a time, I don't know if you remember 2019, Kenya Redcross, and I must say this because it's a learning curve for everyone. 2019, Kenya Redcross tried to be proactive to say, can we act early and not respond to emergencies? So that time the Tuckwell Gorge was overfilling and it was likely to overflow.
Which is, again, now.
Yes. So we took early action. We raised noise. We said we need resources to go and respond early. And we received a very big backlash. People are saying, these guys just want to make money. So we had to be quiet and just work with what we could work with. Then later on, people are seeing and saying, okay, so the idea was to act early. But you see, that was a strange phenomenon to people. People are used to seeing people dying, seeing gory pictures, then people now can give. But the main conversation we are having right now, can we adopt anticipatory approaches? Can we be able to anticipate disasters, act early, and avert the huge losses that we could experience? It is known that evidence has shown that for every early action taken, if you're to use $4, you save $3, you use 1.